I feel like every time you turn that on, I want to dance or something. All right. Chapter 3. Can you see the whole whiteboard? Yeah?
Not the class thing over
Not
there,
this thing?
Yeah.
Nah, you don't need to see that anyway. All right. Chapter 3. Chapter 3 is medical, legal, and ethical issues. So, we're going to talk about consent and refusal of care. We're going to talk about confidentiality. We're going to talk about advanced directives. We're going to talk about tort and criminal actions, evidence preservation, statutory responsibilities, mandatory reporting, ethical principles and moral obligations, and end-of-life issues. Sounds like a lot, right? Hopefully it won't feel like quite that much. Okay. What is consent?
Permission to do something?
Consent is permission. How do you get permission from someone with whom you need to provide care?
There have to be conscious, rational, capable of making informed decisions.
Are you reading directly out of your textbook?
Yes.
Well,
All right.
first you've got to gain their trust.
Okay, so first you have to gain their trust. So when we talk about consent, we have a couple of different types of consent. What are the types of consent that we're going to talk about?
Implied.
Go ahead, read out of your book.
Implied. Eyes for up.
The first one is, actually, the first one that I want to talk about is not implied. The first one that I want to talk about is the type of consent that is the gold standard of consent. Okay? It's expressed.
Expressed. Okay.
Now, does expressed consent, does it have to be verbal?
No.
No? No, it doesn't.
Verbally or otherwise?
Verbally or otherwise. Okay, so if I'm choking, and you come up to me and you say, "Can I help you?" And I go,
Yeah.
"Did I just express consent? Did I use any words whatsoever?" No. Could you tell that I wanted help? Yeah. So expressed consent is some type of verbal or otherwise permission to treat a person. Okay? Okay.
That's the universal shuffle, so
Why is this the gold standard of consent?
There's no gray area.
There's no gray area. You asked for permission, they gave it to you. Okay? Now let's talk about implied consent. What is implied consent?
Person is possibly in cardiac arrest or unconscious, and you can just see that they need help, so it's implied that you're going to help them.
Okay, Chief?
it takes the position of what you think a normal person would want in a case where they can't answer for themselves.
Right. So if we combine the two of those together, you would consider yourself to be a normal person, and if you were in that patient's situation, would you want help? Yes, I would. Okay, that's implied consent. Okay? Okay, what is the next type of consent?
Oh, there's other people in the classroom.
But you're the one talking.
Involuntary.
What is it?
Involuntary.
Involuntary. And what is involuntary consent? Doesn't that sound like an oxymoron?
It's for the well-being of the patient, but they're forced to have it upon them, I guess.
Okay. Give me an example.
Somebody's suicidal.
Somebody who's suicidal. If a person is suicidal, are they competent?
No.
Okay, if they're not competent, can they give consent?
No.
Can they refuse care?
No.
If they're not competent to consent, they're also not competent to refuse care. Competency is the same measurement for consent or refusal. Okay? This is also used in cases of like, where you have a guardian ad litem for people who are, or medical power of attorney for people who are adults but don't have the decision-making capability of taking care of themselves. Okay? What's the last type of consent that we're going to talk about?
Consent of a minor.
Yeah, or lack of consent of a minor. So we call it in loco parentis. Which means
That means go get a cop. Look for parents and get a cop.
means in the absence of the parents, you assume that they, as good, caring parents who don't have any religious objections, would want to have their children treated. Okay? This means that me, as a teacher here, I can give consent for my students to be treated because their parents are absent, but I'm not. I'm here. I can give that consent. Okay? Children who are minors, in the state of Idaho, you're a minor until you're 18. There are no emancipation laws. Okay? In the state of Idaho, you're a minor until you're 18. So, children who are under the age of 18, even if it's by a day, are still legally not considered competent. Here. Okay? Those rules vary in other states, but here in Idaho, they're not considered competent because they're not yet 18. So, what is competence?
Being of sound mind and body.
Do they have to be of sound body?
I guess not body, no. Sound mind.
Sound mind. How do we determine if they are of sound mind or not?
Ask some questions.
Ask them questions. What questions are you going to ask them?
Questions that the
Questions that they know the answer to?
a general person would know the answers to.
Okay. How about, who are you? What happened? What day is it? Why are we here? Okay.
These are also the same questions that you would ask to determine a level of consciousness.
Yes, they are. Yes, they are. So we're going to check and see if they are ANO times 4. Okay? ANO times 4. That means alert and oriented. 2, person,
Place
place, time,
and events.
and event. Do you think that if a person is alert and oriented to person, place, time, and event, that they're competent? It's a good place to start.
That's a starting point.
What else do we need to determine if they're competent? We just talked about one of them. They have to be over 18. What else might impair a patient's ability to make a decision?
The situation they're in. I mean,
The
if they're
situation they're in. What could cause that?
extreme grief or anger or
Okay? Or pain?
pain.
Or alcohol or drugs.
Drugs or alcohol? What else might be a consideration?
Finances.
Advancing age.
Finances?
Well, I mean, if they may not, well, it's not competence, but they may refuse things because of a financial situation. But that's not competence. I was just saying.
It might be a reason why somebody would refuse care though, right?
Yeah.
Right, but that's not one of the
No.
things that's going to help us to determine whether or not they're competent. What
They
else?
have a head trauma or
Okay, if
something
they,
like that.
so let's just add trauma right here.
You might have advancing age.
Okay, what might advancing age do to your patient?
Well, if these people have, like, the onset of any kind of dementia or any kind of thing based on being an older person, their mental state, yeah.
Okay, what are some physical things that could cause us problems? How about hearing or vision problems? If a person can't hear you, can they make an informed decision?
No.
What about language barriers? If you don't speak fluent Spanish and your patient doesn't speak English, can they make an informed decision? In order for a person to be considered competent, they have to be able to make an informed decision. Okay? That informed decision can either be consent or refusal. But either way, they have to be informed to make that decision. So if we have issues like hearing or vision or language, they're probably mentally competent, but they can't make an informed decision. Because they can't make an informed decision, they can't give us consent and they can't refuse care. I mean, I suppose that a guy who is, or girl who speaks Spanish and doesn't want to get in the ambulance probably isn't going to get in the back of the ambulance. But guess who you're going to get on your phone?
Translator.
You're going to get your handy dandy little Statecom and you're going to call them up and you're going to say, hey, I need a Spanish language translator. And they're going to say, okay, beep, beep, boop, boop. They're going to give you a Spanish language translator. Then maybe you can talk to your patient and figure out what the problem is. At that point, once you remove this language barrier, is it possible that they can make an informed decision? Yeah. Once they can make an informed decision, they can either consent or refuse as they choose. If they choose to refuse, they must be informed of the risks and consequences of that decision. That's part of that informed patient process. What time did we start that? Like 7:15?
About that, I guess.
Yeah. All right.
13 minutes ago.
Okay. About 7:15. Good call. Okay. People who are competent to consent to care are also competent to refuse care, whether you agree with their decision or not. What are you going to do if a person refuses care, but you fully believe that they need to go to the hospital?
Just inform them
Inform
of
them of their decision, and I'm gonna have to sign a patient refusal form.
Try to
Try to
convince them.
persuade them.
Try and convince them. Why are you going to try and convince them?
Well, you're trying to be a patient advocate, and until that person actually is out of your hands, you're trying to bring them along to what you know to be better for them.
In their best interest, right? Yeah. So we're going to try and convince them if we can. Do you think that we're going to be able to convince everybody? Even the people who need to go, we're not going to be able to convince. Do we have other resources that might be able to convince them?
Yeah, possibly.
Who?
I mean, if you have access to like a chaplain or something like that.
Okay, if you have access to a chaplain, that's a good resource and one that I had never thought of. But yes, you're right.
family members.
Family members? What'd you say, Dusty?
I said family members.
Family, okay. Who
So,
else?
So your partner, they may have a better like rapport with that person.
They may
not
have a
go
better
along.
relationship with your partner. What about people who have more fun tools?
Firefighters.
How about
Paramedic.
more fun tools? Funner isn't a word, is it? They have funner tools? I think I said it appropriately.
Kids.
Kids. You get to ride on Power Wheels.
Yeah.
How about paramedics? Why do you think they would listen to a paramedic over an EMT? They don't know the difference. They don't know you're an EMT when you show up in your shirt. They don't know if you're an EMT or a paramedic. They don't have any clue. Why do you think they would be more likely to listen to a paramedic than to an EMT?
The paramedic will probably offer an explanation at a different level that will probably present more professional than an EMT would because of the kind of things that they can see based on the advanced training that they have. And so that impression, hopefully,
Okay?
if you've got the right paramedic.
If you've got the right paramedic. One of the things I can think about that may make a difference in your patient care and your patient's decision is an EKG. If a paramedic can print off an EKG and they can show this patient, hey, do you see how your QRS wave right here is a little bit short and your T-spike, I don't even know if I'm saying the right thing, your T-spike is way, way, way too high? Can you see that? The guy's going to go, sure. Well, that means that you've had an ST elevated myocardial infarction. You've had a STEMI. What that means is that you've had a heart attack. And if you don't go to the hospital, you're going to have another one. Does that sound a little more professional than your blood pressure is kind of wonky, you're complaining of chest pain, I think you need to go to the hospital? Yeah, so your paramedic might have a shot at getting them to go if you don't. Who else? Their crazy wife, we already talked about family members. You go, right? Who else? I've called my doctor. I've called my medical director and said this person refuses to go to the hospital, but I believe that they need to go. You know why the guy didn't want to go? He didn't want to have to ride from Parma all the way to the VA. He needed to go. My doctor convinced him. I don't know how. I don't know what the doctor said to him. But the doctor convinced him to go, but I sure as heck couldn't. He probably didn't want to ride with me. Is that what you're saying?
That's expensive. Parma ambulance ride?
Yeah, that's a long ambulance ride. Okay. Patients who have attempted suicide or who have conveyed suicidal ideation should not be considered competent. We talked about that a little bit, but patients who have tried to commit suicide or who have thought about suicide and told you that they've thought about suicide, don't trust them. That's a sad statement, but don't trust them. When you are in doubt and you're not sure what to do, it is much, much more defensible to provide care than it is to not. What do you know about patient confidentiality? Let's just switch topics. It's still in chapter 3, but now we're talking about confidentiality.
What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas.
What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. What happens in the back of your ambulance stays in the back of your ambulance, except as you report it to the nurse or the doctor that you're turning your patient over to. Except as you report it on your patient care report. It doesn't go home with you. You don't talk to your spouses about it.
Don't take selfies and
You don't take
Snapchats.
selfies with the patient in the back of your ambulance and post it to your social media accounts.
Coworkers.
When I hear stuff like that, I want to cuss a little bit, but confidential history or confidential information includes patient history, assessment findings, and the treatment provided. If you inappropriately release information, you could be found guilty of violating HIPAA. We've all heard of HIPAA. Have you heard of HIPAA,
Yeah.
Adam? Yeah? We've all heard of HIPAA. We all have a love-hate relationship with HIPAA. Okay? You don't want to be found guilty of violating HIPAA, so just don't do it. There are some situations where you are legally mandated to report your suspicions. If you suspect that an elder or a child is being abused, you are legally required to report those suspicions to whatever the appropriate authority is in your state. In Idaho, it is the Department of Health and Welfare. Okay? If you suspect that there's domestic violence, you are legally required to report that to the police. In cases of dog bites, animal bites, you have to report that to whatever your local authority is to handle those cases. Gunshot wounds, stabbings, things like that, you are required to report to your local law enforcement agencies. Okay, so there are some things that you are required to report. You're legally mandated to report. Most of the time when you go out on a call, you will not see things that you are legally mandated to report. Okay. All right. What is an advance directive? We're switching again. Done with confidentiality. What's an advance directive?
It's a written directive of specifying specific medical treatment
AKA
For what?
A DNR.
for somebody who has some sort of illness or age or, yeah, DNR
Okay.
basically.
An advance directive is a document that outlines a patient's end of life decisions.
I try not to read it out of the book.
I'll give you a bonus point for that. Do you need a highlighter so you can write 101%?
I do.
Okay. A document that outlines a patient's end-of-life decisions. Give me a couple of examples of what an advance directive is. You said one already.
DNR.
DNR. In Idaho, what is our DNR? You all finished the class already.
Post.
Did you finish the class already?
Yeah.
No.
Oh, I thought you meant like, I've done the class before. I thought you meant the class in general.
No, I mean the online class for advanced directives in Idaho.
Oh, no. Safe haven.
You did. Are all your certificates in your folder?
Not the
Wait,
safe
what
haven.
one?
Yeah.
It's the post form,
Yeah, I
guys.
did that one.
Post.
Then why didn't you know that it was an advanced directive? Or that it's the only legally recognized form of the do not resuscitate order in the state of Idaho?
Because I got confused with the question.
What does post mean?
I'm letting other people answer. I've answered too many.
I don't think he's talked all night.
I talked over him a couple times.
What does post mean?
After? Or you mean
No.
the?
No, I mean this acronym. What does it mean?
Physicians.
Orders.
Physicians' orders. Scope of treatment.
Physician's orders for scope of treatment. And in Idaho, the only DNR form that you recognize in the field is the post form. The post form has several different sections. Do you remember what the sections on the post form are?
I know what it needs to consist of is you've got the patient's identification on it.
I just mean about the decisions that you can make for your patient or that they've made for themselves.
Oh.
How about no resuscitative efforts?
Right.
I just spelled that wrong. I got the R and the S and I already spelled it wrong. I don't like how resuscitative is spelled. R-E-S.
Sussin. S-U-S.
S-U-S, S-U-S-C-I, resuscitation. Oh, gosh. Okay, no resuscitation is one of the options that they can choose. They don't want you to do anything. You come across them when they're pulseless and apneic, they want you to let them die. Okay? They check that little box. One of the other options that they have is comfort measures only. No nutrition, nothing like that, they just choose comfort measures. So they get painkillers until they die. Okay, they can check that box. They can only check one of the 4 boxes. They don't get to check them all. Okay? They also can have nutritive measures only.
Feeding tube.
Yep. What's the last option, do you think?
It's just some things, like no extreme measures. I like the word. It's like, they don't want to be like on life support basically, but you can do like CPR and stuff. Is that right?
That's more going to be in our living will rather than our post form. Okay? The last option that they have is to run a full code. Now, let me ask you a question. Why in the heck would someone who is nearing the end of their life and has a post form, why would they want a full code? Doesn't a post form defeats the purpose of a full code, doesn't it? If you don't find a post form, what are you going to do?
Full code.
Full code. Why would you have a post form that says full code?
So
It's
then
their
the
decision.
so then the family can't lie to you.
So their family can't lie to you? What if their family does lie to you?
You
Oh, they've got a post form somewhere.
you have to see it.
You have to see it, and you have to look at the check mark, and you have to do what the check mark says. I don't see post forms in the pre-hospital field much at all. You know where I do see them? In interfacility transfers. Lots and lots and lots of them in interfacility transfers. Okay, what's the difference between a post and a living will?
Is that kind of what I said?
Well,
Yeah.
a post document is countersigned by an MD, a doctor. A living will can be done that's a legal document. It's done with a lawyer.
Doesn't even have to be done with a lawyer.
Notary.
You can do it when you check in for surgery at a hospital. That's why they ask you every time you check in. Do you have a living will? Yep. Did you lie? Maybe. But do you have a living will? Do your significant others, do they know what you want to have happen to your body if something were to happen to you? I'm pretty darn clear with my husband what I want to have happen. I'm an organ donor. I don't want to be a vegetable. If something happens and I stroke out during surgery, let me die. I don't want to be a burden on him. I don't want to be a burden on my children. My living will says that. I can't have a post form because I don't have a terminal disease. But he knows what I want in my living will. He knows what I want, and it's expressed in my living will. Okay. What other type of advance directive is there?
Powers of attorney.
Powers of attorney. When my parents were writing up their wills, they gave all of us a responsibility. One of my sisters is responsible for the financial part of their estate. One of my sisters is responsible for whatever. That's my job. Aww. I don't want to have to be the one to pull a plug or to say it's time to pull the plug. My sisters will hate me forever if it ever comes down to that. My youngest one especially. But they gave me that responsibility because I'm probably the best one who's capable of dealing with it, of handling it, of making the right decisions. My littlest sister would let them hang on forever. And she'd never stop. She'd never get she'd never get to the acceptance part of grieving. They'd be in a coma for 30 years, or frozen and on ice like Walt Disney. Oh, we get to talk about signs of death. I really like this part. So we're going to stop this, and we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we'll continue with chapter 3.